All right, welcome back, Florida Football Insiders Podcast. You just heard the Tennessee side of the showdown with the Gators, and now we are going to get the Gator perspective as the Gators come into this game Saturday night at 1-1 after their win over McNeese State. And we're going to talk to Kevin Brockway, beat reporter for the Gainesville Sun. He's been a regular here on the podcast. And get the Gator side of things as we enter a pivotal game here for Billy Napier. So, Kevin, welcome back.
Good to be back. How are you?
I'm well. Well, obviously, this is a kind of a slow week in college football, and so the Gators are kind of back in the national spotlight again from a couple weeks ago when they kicked off the year at Utah. They come back and beat McNeese State, and now they're kind of back in the spotlight a little bit. You got Chris Fowler and Herb Street going to be here from ESPN covering the game. So give me a little sense of the Gators through 2 weeks.
Well, I think this is a huge pivotal game for the Napier era because obviously, you lose the game at Utah, but that's not a conference game. This is the start of the SEC. The last year of the SEC, which is pretty interesting. This has always been a big rivalry game going back to the 1990s. And you're at home, you've got a sellout behind you. It's going to be kind of a blue out game. They want the fans to wear blue. The Gators are going to be blue on blue. So it's going to be one of those games where you're going to have the atmosphere a little bit. But this is still a very young team, Jason, and a team that's, certainly got a lot of young, promising players. But this is going to be their first taste of the SEC, the size, the physicality, and certainly Tennessee coming off what they did last year under Josh Heupel, 11-2, and they're 2-0 this year. They come in pretty confident.
You get the sense that everybody in the building realizes the urgency of this game about this. If you lose both the big games early, Utah, Tennessee, that it could be I won't say the doldrums could set in again. So has Billy talked about the urgency of this game?
Yeah, I think so in terms of and rivals too. The fact that last year they were 0-4 against their rivals. This is a rivalry game. This is the game where that a lot of Gator boosters, a lot of Gator fans, take pride in beating the rivals. And listen, Billy Napier has not got that done yet. Now, really, going back to last year, you could kind of say Utah was a statement win, but that statement was kind of erased quickly the following week when they lost to Tennessee. Lost to Kentucky, excuse me. This could be another one of those, wins if Florida can get it, that could maybe change the perception of Billy Napier a little bit amongst Florida fans and and nationally as well, because this is a ranked team coming in here, number 9 in the country. It's a game really that could help maybe get buy-in. And if you lose this game, then maybe you lose a little buy-in, particularly from the veterans. I think the younger guys will play hard the rest of the season regardless. But I think if you're 1-2, it's going to be really hard for some of the veterans, some of the maybe holdovers from the Mullen era, really, give it, to really keep their spirits up for the rest of the season.
And the other part of this is you look through the state of Florida. You had Miami with a huge win over Texas A&M, kind of their reemergence. Florida State is doing what they're doing up in Tallahassee. So if Florida loses this game, even from just a strictly of a state of Florida recruiting perspective, things like that, I think they fall one step further behind what you got going on at Miami and Florida State.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing, right? What the ACC is 4-1 against the SEC too. Which is something, right? And who would have thought that to start the season? But I do think that it's been a little bit of a rough start overall for the conference in some of these head-to-head matchups, which has to be concerning when you look at the BCS rankings in November and December. That's going to be weighted. So I think this is really an important year. I mean, Georgia's still Georgia, obviously, and because they lost that Oklahoma game, they haven't really, they will not really challenge themselves in the non-conference schedule. But the rest of the league, it's kind of up for grabs, I think, a little bit in terms of, Alabama breaking in a young quarterback. They look vulnerable, on the west side of things. So it's going to be pretty fascinating when you look at it. But for Florida, you want to, I think you want to have a successful season too, because you've got the number 3 recruiting class coming in next year. You want to hold that class together. right now. Get them all signed on the dotted line in December. DJ Lagway, of course, the quarterback being the most important piece. I do think Graham Mertz 2 weeks has done okay. His completion percentage is 75%. Even in the Utah game, he moved the football. There were just a lot of red zone mistakes in that game. But the offensive line, which played well against McNeese. Granted, McNeese is going to have to play well. They get Kingsley Agakin back, which is going to be big in terms of the offensive line. Having a veteran in there, and they're going to have to protect Graham Mertz because Tennessee is a pretty good pass rushing team, and they do it with the 4-man rush. They don't really have to blitz to get pressure on the quarterback.
Yeah, when you look at and we're going to get to Mertz in the offense here in a second. When you look at the Gators, obviously Pearsall had a nice game against McNeese. Montrell Johnson ran the ball well. Is the running game still going to be the kind of the point where we start this offensive scheme on Saturday, especially with this high powered potentially Tennessee offense where you want to slow the pace of the game down?
Yeah, well, I think you want to establish the run. You would think that in the tempo situation, but they couldn't establish the run against Utah.
Right.
So I think, and I do think teams are going to stack the box a little bit and make Mertz beat you with his arm. So I think that's going to be important too. I just think balance overall is going to be important. I mean, if you look at the first two games, game one, they threw the ball well against Utah from a yardage perspective, didn't really run it. Game two against McNeese, they ran the ball well, and they didn't really throw it much. They didn't really have to. But Mertz did have that 50-yard connection late in the game. So he did show that he could get the deep ball in there. And I think they're going to have to do more of that and just really have a balanced game where they can, run and pass and keep Tennessee's defense off balance a little bit.
What was kind of the most encouraging thing that Coach Napier took out of the Utah game? Obviously, the result wasn't what they wanted. What were the couple positive things they took out of the Utah game that they think can translate to Tennessee and down the road?
Well, I do think that, after giving up the big play early in that Utah game, the defense settled in and played a really nice game. And they've been much better on third down in both games, 5 of 23. They nearly pitched a shutout against McNeese. They probably should have, if not for that fumble by the, walk-on running back late in the game. And for those of a betting interest out there, I saw that was on Bad Beats last night. It was 40. It looked like they were going to win 49-0. But anyway, regardless of that, listen, Austin Armstrong, I think, has this defense playing pretty well. They're not getting sacks. They're not getting turnovers. Only 2 sacks, no turnovers. They're going to need to do that. But they're so much better on third down getting off the field. And I think that really helps the offense from that standpoint. Complementary football, being able to get more possessions for your offense, being able to create an imbalance in time of possession. So I do think you're seeing some young guys. Jordan Castell, a freshman, is starting at safety and has done pretty well. Has held his own. Shamar James is playing really well at the linebacker spot. He has 19 tackles through 2 games. So I do think that that's the upside. And if you can, frustrate Joe Milton, get him into some mistakes, you never know what could happen. I mean, listen, I'm a Jets fan. Zach Wilson, obviously Aaron Rodgers was knocked out early. Our franchise is cursed. But what did the Jets do? They forced 4 turnovers that kept them in the game, and they, won on a special teams play at the end of the game. So I think you're going to have to do that against Joe Milton, to force him into some mistakes, get some extra possessions with some turnovers, and you might have a shot.
Interesting thing will be interesting to see how Austin Armstrong handles the tempo of Josh Heupel in this. We know they like to play super fast. Do you think does he think he has enough depth on defense to be able to handle the tempo of this Tennessee offense? You might have to be out there for 85 to 90 plays in this game Saturday night.
Yeah, and but this defense has has more depth, and they do rotate a lot of guys on the defensive line, which I think certainly helps. And the defensive tackles, obviously losing Justice Boone early in the season kind of hurts that a little bit on the defensive line rotation. But you're still seeing them, rotate in 6-7 guys. And some of the young guys, again, Kelby Collins, TJ Searcy, these guys are true freshmen. They're bringing them in there, and there's not much drop-off, which is encouraging to see. The SEC is a different animal, but there wasn't much drop-off when they brought them into the Utah game, which is a Power 5 opponent. So I do think you're going to see a lot of those guys rotate in and out. Manny Nunnery at the linebacker spot with Taraja Mitchell, Shamar James, Scooby Williams, who had a sack in the McNeese game, is playing really well early this season too. So I think they have a lot of pieces that they can bring in and out and keep guys, fresh for 4 quarters.
Last thing, we'll get you out of here. A couple more little things. Talk about the difference between playing at the Swamp and at a 3:30 as opposed to a 7:00 game, night game. Obviously, we're doing a little something special this week with the all blue on blue. Just talk about that atmosphere difference between playing an afternoon game and a big game at night.
Yeah, well, the afternoon game, the humidity can come into play a little bit, for a team like Tennessee coming down there. But yeah, it is an electric atmosphere at night. It's a lot of fun to play in the Swamp at night. I think the crowd will be, will be pretty hyped for this game, and the fact that they got well against McNeese State, I think that inspires some confidence. I think there were a lot of questions about the McNeese State game. It wasn't a sellout, but it was 88,000, and that was a legit attendance figure. I mean, it was pretty full,
right,
throughout that stadium. So I think for the SEC opener, yeah, maybe you see it 90, maybe you see it completely full. And, I think Napier was kind of pleading in the press conference yesterday, hey, look, you guys can really make a difference for us if you come out and make some noise, for sure. And Swamp is one of those stadiums too, where, the noise really, reverberates in the stadium, yes, and really kind of create havoc for opposing teams. So I think that they're hopeful that it'll be a good showing, and that that atmosphere, they've got the new LED lights and the whole 9 yards. And I think it'll be that kind of an atmosphere. But ultimately, it's going to come down to how Florida plays too, and they're going to have to play a mistake-free game. They're certainly going to have to play a lot more disciplined than they did against Utah in their last Power 5 opponent, and they did that against McNeese State too. I mean, 4 penalties for 20 yards, botched hold on an extra point, and the late fumble by the walk-on. But other than that, fairly clean game, and they're going to have to play really clean football to have a chance as well.
Last thing, do you expect this to be a kind of game where Billy will pull out something out of the trick plays, that kind of stuff, to try to get, obviously it's a home game, it's a game they need, and they really do need the game. Is this something where you think where Billy could empty the bag as far as some of that stuff kind of goes?
Well, it was interesting because the McNeese State game, they did this kind of direct snap and end around to Eugene Wilson. It was an effective play. My thought was, hey, why not save that for next week?
Right.
But we haven't, I don't know if Napier is as much of a trick play guy as Dan Mullen is, but he might have something up his sleeve. But I think they're going to keep it fairly conventional with Graham Mertz. They have a lot of faith in Graham Mertz in terms of moving the ball. This is a team that's had a 98-yard touchdown drive and a 99-yard touchdown 2 games into the season. So they're showing the ability to sustain drives. I think it's going to be a matter of also the red zone execution too. It's like, once you get inside there, can you punch it in? And 6 for 6 against McNeese State, which was good, but the red zone execution was not very good against Utah, against a tougher defense. So now you're facing another Power 5 defense in Tennessee. Can you really execute in the red zone and get those scores?
Last one. Give me the one position group that if Florida's going to make some big improvements the next 10 weeks of the year, what's the 1 or 2 position groups that really need to elevate their play so far?
Yeah, I think the offensive line for sure is going to have to really solidify and come together. I think they're missing Osiris Torrance more than people think, and he started for the Bills last night. He looked really good, by the way.
Right.
And I do think that maybe some more threats at wide receiver. I like Pearsall. Eugene Wilson is coming around, but you'd like to see a few more guys at the wide receiver position emerge and be guys that Graham Mertz can count on.
All right, you can find Kevin Brockway's all of his great work at the Gainesville Sun, on X at Kevin Brockway G1 is his Twitter and X feed these days. Kevin, where can they find all your game day coverage and stuff with the Gainesville Sun?
Yeah, Gatorsports.com and Gainesville.com are the two main places. But I'm all over the state too. So if you're in Naples and Fort Myers, you can get me on the local website there. If you're in Palm Beach or Melbourne or Jacksonville, all those websites will carry my work as well.
We're looking for a big night in the Swamp Saturday night, ESPN, 7:00. Herb Street and Fowler will be on the call. So, Kevin, enjoy the game and keep up the great work and the great coverage of the Gators.
Okay, thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Have a great week, folks, and we'll see you next time on the Florida Football Insiders Podcast.